our next speaker is the wonderful Tui Boyes. She is the founder and CEO of Spectrum Education and is a total champion for lifelong learning. And so welcome, Karen. It's great to have you here today.
I'm excited, Cathy, and hi, all the viewers.
Hi. So it's going to be really, really neat. So you're talking about the Spectrum Education. Tell me a little bit about why you started Spectrum Education.
Oh, well, that's a whole topic in itself. But basically, as a teacher, I realized that I was taught what to learn, but not how to learn. And so I really wanted to be able to, how children learn, to teach them how they teach others how children learned and how the brain worked. I also saw the light in children's eyes die around about that age of 6 and 7, that passion for learning die. And I wanted to do something about it.
It's so sad, isn't it? Yeah. And that leads really well into my first question, which is, what do you see are the current challenges in the education system?
Well, I think the biggest challenge I see is the system is not fit for purpose anymore, that the system is set for the 18th century, which is when the manufacturing age, when we wanted people to be in factories, to be employees. See, employees have to turn up on time, they have to do as they're told, they have to do it to a certain standard, and they clock out at the end of the day. The challenge with that is, and school, by the way, is still the same. The challenge with that is that in the 21st century, the futurists are telling us in the next 10 years, 40% of our 5-year-olds in our school will have to be self-employed. And so because of that, they need completely different mindset and skills than an employee. So to be self-employed, you have to be out. No one knows if you turn up on time. And for the teachers who are watching, if you have that last graduating class in your class this year, please, if you're still marking the roll, the register to know they're there, no one's going to do that when they have to be self-employed. They have to be able to do not only the work, but they have to get the work, they have to invoice the work, they have to be multi-skilled, not one task focused. They have to be problem solvers. So there's so many things that they have to do. And my current problem or challenge with the education system is it's not fit for this current generation and the future generations.
And it's quite confronting when you hear people say that the current education system was designed in the 18th century. There's a lot of people who go, oh, I don't know that I believe that. And yet when you stop and think about it, it's absolutely and utterly true.
It's even before that, Cathy. It's actually the 14th century where the higher education started just for the rich and the noble people. So it's got a long history, but it needs to be over.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what do you wish you'd learned at school?
What do I wish I'd learned at school? I wish that I'd learned that life's not fair. I wish that someone had told me that, there are going to be ups and downs, and to be able to cope with those downs, to be able to know that it's okay to have the downs, because then you really know when you experience the ups. So I really wish that I'd been taught that life's not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I see so many people that are almost numbing in order to be able to take out those lows, but then they're not getting the appreciation of the highs as well. So
correct.
Absolutely true. Okay, Karen, you talk about us having a learning to learn superpower. Okay, so please tell me more about that. What do you mean? What is our learning to learn superpower?
Well, Cathy, I'm going to ask you a question. If you were walking down the beach and you found this bottle, maybe a lamp that had washed up on the shore, and you knew there was a genie inside, and you rubbed that lamp and the genie popped out, and the genie said to you, you can have one wish. You can wish for anything. There's no restraint on the wishes. What would you wish for? She's thinking.
I am thinking. Well, the standard answer to that is an infinite number of wishes, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what people say. 1,000,000 wishes. Well, if the genie popped out of the bottle and asked me, what would I wish for? I would wish for the ability to learn, the learning to learn strategies, the learning to learn skills. Because when you can learn, the world is your oyster. You can do anything and have anything and know anything if you have that ability to learn.
Mm, mm.
So that would
Wonderful.
be my superpower that I
The
would love.
superpower, absolutely. And we all have that superpower, don't we,
We
within
do,
us? Yeah. And
if
so
we
it's
are
about,
taught how.
yeah.
See, school doesn't necessarily teach children how we learn.
Mm,
And so we have the capacity, but we don't necessarily have the skills on how.
absolutely. Okay, so that leads us into this first question then, which is, how do our brains actually learn?
Yeah, so I've got a little diagram for you to help you with this. So this is my wonderful little whiteboard, and there's 3 parts of the learning cycle. There's what we call the input, the output, and then there's this third word here, but let me come to this part in a moment. So input is what most people focus on when they're at school. So what are we learning? What is going into the brain? And the teacher is putting information into the brain. What happens after that is we have to have some form of output. Now, the output is your ability to recall, to be able to explain it, to be able to use the information, to be able to pass a test, which ultimately, which is what school still is about, can you pass the test? Can you pass the exam? Now, and so most people, when they're studying, they are studying for input, not output. Now, the challenge we have is that when you input something, there is going to be a gap here between what was input and what is output. So you're not going to remember everything that we've been told. You're not going to remember everything that you've learned. You're not straight away. You're not going to be able to recall and output everything. So this is where this key part here is so, so important. And I've got to swap hands and sides here because I had it on the wrong side. So this is when we have to relearn. Now, relearning means that you find out where your gap is. You find out what you don't know between the input and the output, and you have to relearn it. So, relearning means that you maybe go and watch a video of another teacher teaching it, or you ask questions, or you discuss the information with someone else to try and get clarity, or you read and highlight someone else's work on this, or you create a dance or a mnemonic or a weird way to be able to try and understand the information. And then once you've done that, once you've found the gap that you don't understand, then we go back to, well, that is have to go back to more input. And then you check, what is your output again? And there will probably still be a gap. And then we have to relearn again. And so this is the challenge we have in schools. And for this learning to learn superpower is most people aren't aware that it's about output and relearning. And so if there was a study tip that I always teach, and the most important study tip I teach, it's learn what you don't know.
Mm.
To study what you don't know, go and learn what you don't know. So often we're embarrassed about what we don't know, but we should be excited because that's where the learning opportunity is. So when you've input again, then you're going to check your output again. So these are things like, do you know, remember the old-fashioned flashcards? And you had, something on one side and the answer on the other, and you're going to make piles of all the ones you know and all the ones you don't know. And then you're going to relearn the ones you don't know. You're going to mix them all up, check how many you know, and then you're going to go around and around. Or maybe you ask someone to test you. Or maybe you test yourself by covering and seeing if you remember it. Or you cover it and see if you can redraw the diagram. Or you explain it to somebody else. And the ultimate way that you know that you understand something is that you can teach it. So when you ask me how the brain learns, it learns through this cycle here, going around and around and around.
And I love how you've used there the ability to be able to teach somebody else, being able to talk about it with somebody else. And, we can use our friends, we can use other teachers, we can use other people that have got the same interests as us, haven't we, to be able to discuss the stuff that we've learned and to be able to go, hang on a moment, I don't understand that little bit there. How does that little bit there work?
And it's that vulnerability around the learning, being able to say, hey, I don't know, I don't understand. You know, in a classroom, this is a high risk move, putting your hand up, because you could be wrong, or worse, you could be right. Goody two shoes, teacher's pet, you always know the answer. And so this is a high risk move, and it needs to be a move that is actually celebrated in a classroom environment. It's like, hey, yay, they're asking questions. Yay, they feel safe enough in my classroom, in my environment, in my place to be able to ask questions and say I don't know, and therefore to learn.
And that becomes then a life skill, doesn't it? When you were talking before about the entrepreneurial spirit that we need, or that so many of our 5-year-olds need, is what is the gap? What is the hole in my business plan, or in my understanding of this particular aspect? Who do I go to for help in order to be able to learn? Yeah. And finding that tribe of people that you can then learn with and alongside.
Yes. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so much of our education system at the moment is around facts and figures. So how can we learn and recall facts and figures?
Well, there's 3 main ways that I teach. Well, there's actually 7, but we'll give you 3 today. So the first one is to think about association. The brain learns and remembers mainly through association, by being able to link things together. Oh, this is like this. So it's about finding maybe, well, let me back up a little. The most common question I hear students when they're learning, whether I'm working with university students, teenagers, or young children, the number one question I hear is, why am I learning this? And so you got to have the why. And then they go, but how does this apply to real life? And so that's the tricky part, because if we don't know, and many teachers don't know how it applies to real life, because the truth is teachers are doing what the government has asked them to do, to teach the curriculum. The teachers don't choose the curriculum. The government says this is what you must teach this age group. So finding associations, finding out how is trigonometry useful in real life. And so, you know, another superpower that we all have now around our learning to learn is called the internet. And we can just go trigonometry in real life, boof, and in 1.2 seconds you'll get 2 billion hits as to why trigonometry is useful in real life. And so we need to associate what we're learning. Oh, it's gone out of my head. I can't remember which Shakespearean play it is, but one of the Shakespearean plays, you might know, Cathy, one of the Shakespearean plays has been used as the basis of The Lion King. So if you watch The Lion King, is it Hamlet? Oh, I'm really not sure. You know,
it's not relevant in our lives.
yeah, that's right. But so if you're doing Google it, you'll find it. But you know, if you know The Lion King, then you know the Shakespearean play. And so this is about associating these things together. It's like if you watch I'm showing my age now, Bend It Like Beckham, it's exactly the same plot and storyline as My Big Fat White Wedding, because it's all about cultural differences and generational difference. And it's just one's through soccer and the other one's through weddings. And so when we can associate these things, it makes it so much easier. So that's the first way to be able to remember facts and figures. The second way is through what we call repetition. And so I have a technique called the 1-7-30-6M strategy. Now, let me tell you how forgetting actually occurs. Forgetting occurs often because, or 2 reasons, main reasons. One, we have so many things going on in our head that it just slips our mind, literally, because it didn't even go in. Or second, it's because it's there, but it's been layered by so many other pieces of information. So let me give you an example. My husband is an avid reader. He loves reading, and he has a pile of books beside his bed, and they are this is the books I want to read one day pile. Now, when he walks past that pile, which book does he see? The one on top, right? And so when he thinks about the books that he's going to read, he thinks about the one he's seen most recently, or the one on top, or the one that's most current run on top. Now, I was wondering a few Christmases ago what to buy him for Christmas. And a friend said to me, she said, why don't you take the book from the bottom of the pile? So when he's not home, I go up to that pile of books and I carefully pull that bottom book out. I dust it off because truth is it had a bit of dust at the back. And so I dusted it off. I wrapped it up and gave it to him for Christmas. And he opened that parcel and said, wow, I've always wanted to read that book, and put it on the top of the pile. Now, he had no remembering, no recollection of him having ever owned that book, because he just hadn't had any repetition of it, because he continually looking at the top one. Now, I'm wondering about next Christmas, whether there's a jersey in the bottom of his drawer. I'm wondering if I can get away with regifting. No. I don't think it'll work twice, but the repetition schedule, if you truly want to remember information, and this actually the research comes from John Medina in his 12 Brain Rules book, says you need to go over the information to keep it into the brain one day later, within 24 hours. So within 24 hours, you need to tell somebody about it, you need to read your notes, or you need to do something with the information. So one day later, within 24 hours. Next, you then need to go over it 7 days later. Oh yeah, you can count. 7 days later. So a week later. So go back over. Do you still remember it? Do you still know it? By the way, this is why cramming for an exam doesn't work, because we try and shove it all in at once, and you get there and it's as much as you fill the cup, it's overflowing and you can't remember it all. So you need to take spaced repetition. So one day, 1 week, the next one is 30, which is 30 days, or 1 month. So 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and then every 6 months, if you truly want to remember the information. So, Cathy, I know when your children are a bit older now, and my son just celebrated his 21st birthday, and I wanted to appropriately embarrass him, but didn't, because he said he would walk out. So anyway, I've been going through some old books and some old photographs, and it's absolutely amazing 21 years later how much I don't remember of his childhood. And I'm so pleased I kept those books, and I kept the tickets, and I kept everything, and wrote little journal notes. And now I go back and go, wow, and I can remember so much of it. But that's because I haven't had 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, particularly every 6 months, repetition of that information. So you want to keep going over and over and over it. So.
And this works for so many things, doesn't it? It works not just for your facts and figures and those sorts of things, but I've spent a lot of my life learning languages. And if you don't use a language, you lose it. And it's exactly the same, isn't it? It's still there, but it's so much harder to access. So, you've talked about several things in there. You've talked about that constant revision, but you've also talked about looking for patterns with other things that you have learned. Where are the similarities and stuff? Because our brains love being able to find those links. It makes it so much easier for us to access them, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So yeah, so it's that association, or that linking things together. It's that repetition, the 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or every 6 months, if you want it to stay in the brain. And from a neurological level, what you're doing is increasing the myelination, which is the speed, which is the fatty tissue that allows the speed of the processing to happen. And so the more times we go over and over and over something, the faster the recall will be. The third one is to be able to study or learn in small little parts. And I sort of mentioned this before, cramming for an exam, for a test, trying to shove it all in the night before, it doesn't work, because the brain needs time for processing. And so I suggest that you study or learn or try and remember something for 20 minutes and take a 5-minute break. 20 minutes and take a 5-minute break. We call it the Study Smart method. And we have an app called the iStudy Alarm, which the viewers can download onto their phones or their iPads or their devices for free. And it does exactly that. It times you for 20 minutes and gives you that 5-minute break. Now, it's what you do in that 20 minutes is important, but it's the 5 minutes that's equally as important, because that break time is when the brain actually does the processing. That's when your brain actually takes all the information and makes it make sense. That's when the brain starts sorting it out and starts making it, associating it together. It starts linking it. It starts doing a whole lot of magic while you are seemingly doing nothing. Woohoo! Superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's continued overnight, isn't it? You know, when our brains are not only being regenerated and those links being made, but also our bodies are being refreshed and so on. So that's so much a part of this as well, isn't it? When we're studying and when we're learning things, is to be able to look after our physical health, our mental health. Yeah.
I've just recently learned this new neuroscience, and it's fairly new neuroscience, that we know the sleep cycles are about 90 minutes. And so it's the ideal sleep is to have 5 sleep cycles. And that's not new, but the new part is, so that's about 7.5 hours. So the first 3 sleep cycles, that's where your brain is actually processing the information. That's where your brain is doing the learning in those first 3 sleep cycles. In the the last 2, the last 2 sleep cycles is where your brain is used problem solving and creativity. And so I found that really fascinating. So we need to get good quality sleep for the brain to be great at learning.
Absolutely. And that leads really well into the next question, which is, you know, we need to be able to set up our environment so that we're getting really good sleep and things. But how do we set up our learning environment? Not only for learning at school, but also thinking about our work environments and all of those sorts of things as we go on from school.
Yes. So distraction-free is useful. And depending on your level of ability to cope with distraction, that will depend on what that means. But there is a myth that the brain can multitask. We hear this all over and over again. People saying, oh, I can do several things at once. Well, actually, the brain can't. The brain can only focus on one task at a time. And so if you are doing 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, or have distractions in your environment, it will cause the brain to slow down. It will cause the brain to be split in its focus. And what happens is you might get distracted, and then it takes nearly twice as long to get yourself back on track. So in any environment that you want your brain to be learning at its best, to be able to be thinking at its best, distraction-free is important. Now, that's the first one. Lighting is important depending on your age as well. So if you are a teenager, low lighting, in fact, if you're under 25, so not only teenagers, if you're under 25, which Cathy and I are not, we're just out of the 25-year-old age group, right? So if you under the age of 25, you want low lighting, not bright light. And so this is true for 70% of the population of under 25-year-olds, because bright light is actually really harsh on the eyes and actually causes strain. Did you know that in Hong Kong, it's so prestigious to have children reading at the age of 5. Parents start teaching them at 2 and 3 years old to read. But 95% of children in Hong Kong wear glasses because their eyes have been stretched beyond the capacity they're designed for. And now I wear glasses, but that's because I'm over the age of 40. Because something changes in your eyes around about that age of 40. It changes at 25, and again it changes at 40. So low lighting best if you're under 25. If you're over 25, and the further you are away from 25, the brighter light you need. And so those of us a little bit older will know that you go to a restaurant now and you can't read the menu anymore because the lights are too dim. And thank goodness, I was looking for my phone, I don't know where I put it. Thank goodness we have a phone that we can now shine the torch and read the menu, because lighting is important. The other one is, and this question gets asked of me all of the time, and that is around music. Is it okay to have music playing in the background when I'm learning, when I'm thinking, when I'm trying to concentrate? And the answer is yes and no. And the answer really is, it depends. Again, your brain is a learning machine. It's designed to learn. So if there are words, your brain will always listen to the words. So if there are words to the song, your brain will automatically be listening to the words. What that means is, again, back to that multitasking thing, that if your brain is listening to the words, it cannot be listening to the information, or thinking about the information that you're trying to remember, or read the information that you're trying to remember. Actually, have you ever done this? Have you ever read to the bottom of the page and you have no idea what you've read? Or you've ever found yourself reading the same line over and over and over again? That's because the brain was bored. You're reading too slow and the brain gets bored, and the brain goes, oh, I wonder what we'll have for dinner. Oh, and I must ring so-and-so, and I must download that iStudy alarm, and your brain starts thinking about other things. Your eyes are still doing the work, reading, but the brain is not taking it in. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're listening to the words of the music, you shouldn't have music with words. Ideally, you want either silence or something like Baroque music, which is around 60 beats per minute. It's a classical music without the words, and it's a slower beat, which entrains the heart to slow down the brain to a long-term memory state. However, if you put the music on and you don't hear the music, then that's okay. Now, there'll be viewers saying, what's the point of having music if I don't hear it? And you're probably the people who shouldn't have it, because if you don't hear it, what it's doing is it's creating what's called white noise. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this, but have you ever been in your kitchen and suddenly it gets deathly silent? You're just pottering around doing it, and then suddenly it's deathly silent, and why is it so quiet? And you realize that the fridge stopped whirring, or the microwave had stopped, or the fan has stopped, or something that you hadn't even noticed has suddenly stopped. So that's what I'm talking about. That's called white noise until you're aware of it. So many people use music for white noise. And the third thing that's really important around your study environment is having a place that's yours, or a place that's yours to work. Now, I know there's a lot of modern hot desking going on, and people who just come to work and go, here's where where shall I sit today? And that's great for some people who like variety and who like change. But most people, particularly when you're trying to learn, most people like to be in a familiar place, and a place that is your place. So having your seat, your place. So I have a place where I write. I have a place where I eat my dinner at the kitchen table, which are two different places at my kitchen table. So I don't write where I eat, and I don't eat where I write. I have a place where I do my creativity, which tends to be on the floor rather than at a desk and chair. So it's finding where your place is for the different tasks that you need to do.
And that's a key thing, isn't it? It's again that self-awareness of what's happening for you as you're doing this particular thing. And it's really interesting you're picking up about music, because I've had this conversation many times with one of my sons, and I have 4 of them, and he's saying that he cannot study without music on, and he would not cope at all with Baroque music. He needs to listen to some sort of other music, and generally it is music that does have words. So it's really interesting that you're picking up on that. but it's
Probably not hearing the music. That's the point, Cathy. So he's not singing away to it. It's just in the background. It's in its comfort zone, and it makes him feel safe, or makes him feel like this is my space. So it creates that white noise in that space around him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got another guy that I know really well. And when he's got to do some sort of creativity, he actually puts on heavy metal in the background.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like it shuts out absolutely everything else. And then he can concentrate on doing what he's trying to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And really interesting how you're talking about creating that space, the space to be able to do the creativity, to be able to do the repetition, all of those sorts of things, every different task needing its own space in a way. And that's not easy in the way that so many families are living now. And the smaller the space gets that we live in, the harder it is to be able to find our own space, to be able to do different things.
It could even be that you wear a certain hat, like you put a hat on to say, hey, I'm in creativity mode now. Or you put a scarf around your neck that says, hey, I'm in concentration mode right now, or whatever it is. So it could be an article of clothing. Like many of us, when we are at home, we just sloth around in our clothes. But, you know, when you come to do a Zoom interview, put your jacket on. So now I'm in role, and now I'm in that place that I need to be able to concentrate and think in a certain way.
Yeah, and it is that link with mindset, isn't it? It's that releasing. Our brains really are amazing, aren't they?
They are indeed.
Yeah, in terms of how we are, how we be each day can so much affect the outcome of what we're wanting to do.
Yeah, and that ability to be able to metacogitate, think about our thinking and be aware. You mentioned it earlier, that having the body awareness of what's happening in your body, having the awareness of what's happening in your mind. And when you can do that, it's easier to be able to navigate the challenges that you have in your learning and in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads into, again, this awareness of our bodies, isn't it? Is the awareness of our emotions, the awareness of how we're feeling, and the ability that we have to actually change how we're feeling by being aware of our thoughts. And that takes us into a whole nother plan, but
Cathy, the next one.
Yeah. Absolutely, because I know that you've done a whole lot of work on that. So yeah, and it's again that awareness. The more that we can be aware of our thoughts, the more that we can be aware of what we don't know and what we need to carry on learning about, the more that we can be aware of how the different places that we're sitting in as we're studying affects our mood, affects what's going on with us, the stronger and the more superpowers we develop. Isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you very, very much, Karen, for sharing that today about your learning to learn superpower. And I hope that everybody on the call gets to learn more about how their superpower works for them, because it is different for every single person. We need to find our own keys, if you like, and that's taking the information that you've given us about how our brains learn, and then to be able to go, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is what works for me, and go off and be a super person. Yeah.
So Cathy, as part of my offering to the viewers, I've got a couple of articles that they can download about how to hack their memory, how to hack their learning superpower. So they're my gift to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And so many people are into hacking all sorts of things, because when we're time poor, we just need to make it happen, don't we? So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.